Master Chief has become synonymous with the Spartan program. He is the Spartan. He embodies everything it is to be a Spartan: self-sacrifice, bravery, stoicism, sheer grit and determination in the face of adversity, heroicism and innate talent for war, sheer physical presence and capability on the battlefield, immense physical stature, superhuman feats, and a service record to match. He is the very epitome of a Spartan. But what if he never was? Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today I want to discuss what would have happened if the Master Chief, if John 117 never became a Spartan. This will be a two-part series, with part 1 being about what trajectory his life may have taken instead, and part 2 focusing on what would have happened with humanity at large had this scenario had taken place. What would he have done with his life, and how would those choices have affected humanity at large? Now, to set some ground rules, I'm not saying that the Spartan program doesn't exist in this hypothetical situation. I'm saying that the Spartan program continued in his absence. And this is actually strikingly more likely than you may initially give it credit for. The whole method behind the way in which the first children were selected for the Spartan-II program was dependent upon seeking DNA samples from leftover needles from a free vaccination program that was used throughout the colonies. Billions of blood samples from these injections were analysed to see if they had the correct genetic markers that maximised their survivability odds for the program that Dr. Halsey developed as she saw it. From these innumerable blood samples, the original candidates of the Spartan program were identified. There were originally 300 candidates that were identified as being potentials for the Spartan-II program. However, due to budgetary constraints, this number was reduced to 150 of the best candidates. However, budget constraints would come into play again and have this number reduced still further to only 75 candidates. As each genetic profile was identified as being compatible with the Spartan program, they were archived and set aside so that they could be traced and the individual that the DNA originated from could be found. By the time this part of the process actually came into play, the budget had already been constrained to the 150 candidates. So the 150 candidates were identified from the masses of humanity spread across 800 colonies, and were assigned their respective numbers based on what order these candidates were found. So John just so happened to be the 117th candidate identified. And it's been spoken about on numerous occasions that Chief is really no different from any of the other Spartans. The only thing that he has going for him that the others don't is luck. Although I will step in here and say that there are also instances where it's been stated that there were things about him that were better or superior than even the other Spartans. But in either case, the 150 candidates were identified, located, and then the plans for their abduction and replacement with flash clones was set into effect. Now, due to the fact that there were originally supposed to be 300 Spartan-IIs, but this was reduced to the 150 and then reduced again to the 75, means that strictly speaking, John went through 2 levels of screening, but managed to remain within the program. In this hypothetical situation, we're going to assume that he didn't make it through those screenings, and was actually one of those candidates that were in possession of the genetic markers needed for the Spartan program, but had their place effectively forfeit due to financial constraints. So with that now in mind, that effectively John has been shunned aside and cut from the program, we now need to wind the clock back to find John as he was as a 6-year-old boy.
You ever wonder what's up there? Like what? Maybe someone up there was wondering what it's like here. I guess. Do you think we'll ever meet them? I hope so. Don't you?
As a 6-year-old boy, he would spend his free time with his childhood friends. He would play obstacle races with his friends Katrina and Ellie, as well as spending some time stargazing with Ellie Bloom in the fields behind their houses. And whilst superficially this bears striking resemblance to practically any other 6-year-old boy, he was a head taller than other children of his age, as well as being much larger in physical proportions and possessing markedly greater strength, superior reflexes, and having an extremely aggressive drive for success. And even at this young age, was already displaying some of the traits which would come to define him. Even at the age of 6, he saved the would-be Lieutenant Parisia from drowning at Lake Gusev, after which he promised to marry her and keep her safe. As a boy, John attended Elysium City Primary Education Facility number 119, where he held a streak of 45 victories in what was referred to as a brutal version of King of the Hill. He was incredibly bright with a keen intellect, and appeared much more confident and mature for his age. Now the thing about children is that they are almost limitless potential. They could be anything, do anything. Their entire lives are stretched out before them, and their choices and where they decide to take themselves in life can manifest and change the very course of their existence at a moment's notice. But then that means, by the very definition, that with this limitless potential they could be absolutely anything and everything. At that point in time they are nothing, because they haven't yet distilled what it is they are going to be into something more definable. They haven't crystallized that immense potential down into something of specificity. However, from these small glimmers of his childhood, we can already see some defining traits. Yes, he's physically larger than the average child. Yes, he's physically stronger than the average child. He seems to have better reflexes. He's more intelligent and more developed, mature and confident. But he also has within him this spark of protectiveness, of guardianship. He still, at this young age, knowingly and willingly puts himself in harm's way to save another. We also have to bear in mind the world in which John will eventually grow up in. At this moment he's a 6-year-old boy on an outer colony planet called Aridus II. Now, far from being some of the more far-flung outer colonies, Aridus II was actually a very prosperous colony, but was still plagued by insurrectionist and rebel activity, as well as big problems with pirates. The civilian government in the system was overthrown by the turncoat Colonel Robert Watts, and all in all the planet and system was plagued by skirmishes between UNSC forces and insurrectionist and rebel forces, with some of these conflicts boiling over into civilian areas of Aridus II. It's reasonable to expect that as John continued to grow and mature, he would have seen this firsthand. Indeed, it's a possibility he could have been caught in the crossfire in some circumstances of conflicts between UNSC and insurrectionist forces, in which situations I'm more than convinced John would do what he can to protect those he cared about. And barring an awful tragedy in which one of his loved ones were killed by either insurrectionist or UNSC forces, John would likely have greatly disliked the conflict that he was constantly witnessing during his formative years. However, as he reached his 14th birthday, he would have inevitably begun to hear the murmurs across space about humanity coming in contact with an alien species. And far removed from the musings that he had with Ellie in the fields behind their childhood homes, these would most definitely be aliens they did not want to meet. The unfortunate reality being that before too long, the Covenant would arrive on Aridus II. John will have graduated school at the age of 18, at which point it's extraordinarily difficult to say in any great degree of certainty what direction his life would now be taking. Having spent most of his childhood witnessing the chaos between the UNSC and the insurrectionists, along with the fact that Elysium City, his home city, had problems with rebels, insurrectionists and pirates, including insurrectionist attacks on nightclubs that resulted in the deaths of numbers of innocent civilians, it wouldn't be outside of the boundaries of imagination if John decided to begin a career with the Elysium City Law Enforcement, basically the Elysium City Police Department. In such a role, John could use his superior physicality, his size, his strength, and his desire to protect people for the greater good. and being in a position of authority like this in a law enforcement capacity would also put him in just the right position to fight against the insurrectionist and rebel activities within his beloved home city that he had been witnessing most of his life. After training with the Elysium City Law Enforcement, John would likely have graduated that class with honours and then been deployed as a rookie officer. His career as a police officer, however, would come to an abrupt end just a year later, as in 2530, the Covenant found Aridus II, and when the Covenant attacked, they attacked hard. John would have likely done everything in his power to save as many people as possible, perhaps even confronting this alien aggressor face to face with his service pistol or any other weapons that were nearby. Due to his innate capabilities, he likely survived the attack on Aridus II and probably watched as they extracted from the colony as the Covenant began to glass his homeworld. With the grief of losing his home and perhaps people that he knew and loved, this would galvanize John's decisions on what was to come next for his life. The evacuated civilians of Aridus II would ultimately arrive at numerous colonies nearby, as refugees displaced by the war with the Covenant. Assuming at this stage he had no dependents or the people he knew and loved were killed back on Aridus II, John would have nothing tying him down to any one respective location. It is at this point John's experience as a police officer and his innate capabilities physically and mentally being superior to the average human being and his desire to protect other human beings, John would likely have resigned to the idea of enlisting with the UNSC, as this was his best chance at getting face to face with the Covenant and paying back the debt that had just been dealt against him. In his mind, the best way to protect the people was to fight the enemy. After going through boot camp in which he probably excelled, John would have hit active service and would have quickly risen through the ranks and become a notable individual within the UNSC Marine Corps. He likely very shortly thereafter volunteered to become a member of the ODSTs, likely part of the 105th Division, the most elite, respected and brutal division of the ODSTs. I say that it is likely that he would do this because it would be engagements that ODSTs were deployed to that would suit John's innate and natural talent for war, and get him closest to the enemy that he now had such a drive to extinguish. The intense nature of these deployments would likely quickly have earned John a reputation in not a dissimilar fashion to that of Atriox, being one of the few who returns from otherwise suicidal missions time and time again. One of the big tropes of the ODSTs is that officers are promoted from within the rank and file. Thus, if you become an officer within the ODSTs, it means that you are one hard son of a bitch because you had survived drop after drop after drop in utterly horrific circumstances against nearly impossible odds, and returned. As a leader within the ODSTs, you would do everything that the troops under your command would do and more. And I'm sure we can all agree this would have ticked all of the boxes for John. Not to mention the fact that as an ODST, he would have been an absolute unit. He would have been a head taller than any other ODST, broader, stronger, faster, and had a keenly tactical mind in knowing how to flank and outmaneuver his opponents. John may well have served the rest of his career as an ODST, right up until the end of the Human Covenant War. Of course, this is still assuming that the Spartan program continued in his absence, but in the first few years following the end of the Human Covenant War, the Spartan IV program became available for fully grown adults to become Spartan super soldiers. With his exemplary combat history, his prowess on the battlefield, his immense reputation, and his own innate desire to continue to protect humanity, I wouldn't be surprised if John would likely have stepped up to be amongst the first of the Spartan IVs and in doing so, would rapidly excel amongst the Spartan rank and file, once again earning a reputation as one of the most effective Spartan operatives in existence. And that's what I think John would have been had he not have been abducted for the Spartan-II program. Let me know down below if you agree with my sentiments. If you disagree, give me your opinions on what he would have done instead. And until next time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons Spartan-10148, the Metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan-0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir and Born Stellar, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.